Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Who knew Margaret Thatcher was such an icon for the SNP? Who knew they admired her and loved her as much as they obviously do? It's stunning and brave of them to admit this. It's stunning that they would keep her enshrined on their website for so very long. It's almost as though they have a little secret loving, little lusting over the marvellous Margaret as they see her, deifying her, making her the most magnificent woman that ever strode across the world of politics. And they are immortalising her as a deity for all Scots to admire and to praise. Or something like that. Certainly, there is no other reason we can assume why they kept a fake quote of Margaret Thatcher on their website for 2 months after it was shown and proved to be completely false. But of course, this quote served their purposes. They knew it was false, but they kept it there anyway. Partially because it helped them, and I think partially because secretly they just love Margaret. Let's have a look at this story and see what's going on. Here goes. Right, before I get into this story, I would just like to make a thank you, to acknowledge and to thank you, Ting Tong. Now, that's not Ting Tong from Tooting. That's Ting Tong from somewhere in the United States who, in the early hours this morning, or I suppose we've got to allow for time zones, late last night or at some point last night, was very generous, let's just say, and showed that generosity, which I would like to thank that person. I have no indication of whether you're a Mr. or a Mrs. or a Miss, I don't know, but you are nonetheless very generous, and I am very grateful. Thank you very much for your super thanks. Now, we'll go and have a look here. The SNP keeps fake Margaret Thatcher quote on the website for 2 months. Is this another one for the rebuttal unit? They set that rebuttal unit up to what they call correct false narrative, where mistakes had made, where people were quoting the wrong thing. Of course, they were aiming at other parties talking about them. But it seems that if anyone, it's the SNP that'll be keeping this rebuttal unit the busiest. So the Nats Deputy Leader Keith Brown referenced a false comment in his party conference speech a couple of months ago. But despite being made aware of it at the time, 2 months ago now, the party has chosen to keep it on the internet. And there she is, dear Margaret, the inventor of soft whip ice cream. Technically not. It's often attributed to her. She was just one of the chemists that was working on a way of infusing fluids with gases. But it led to the invention of soft whip ice cream. So she, whilst not the actual inventor of it, she was involved in the process of inventing it. Got to give her that. No end to Margaret's genius, I suppose. There's a thing, and I'm not going to get into the politics of it. She at least had a proper job before she went into politics. Educated woman, she was a chemist. She went and worked as a chemist for years before going into politics. So she knew the pointy end of work. Incidentally, oh God, another tangent. It's a tangent of a tangent. Saying about her not inventing ice cream. Roger Moore, he who then later played James Bond and the Saint and all that. You know the, what's the ice cream? The Magnum. Chalk ice on a stick. Yeah? Roger Moore invented that. That is genuine. Anyway, we're getting. The SNP has been accused of doubling down on fake news after it emerged it had kept a fake story about Margaret Thatcher on its website for 2 months. They really must love Margaret. We told in October how the party's deputy leader, Keith Brown, MSP, had claimed the former Prime Minister had said all the Nats needed for Scotland to be independent was the majority of SNP MPs to be returned from Scottish seats. She said no such thing because, I explained, Margaret Thatcher was an intelligent woman. She was not as stupid as anyone who is in the SNP. It was rubbish. It was invented. It was made up to fit a narrative. Thatcher said no such thing. The fake quote originated on an internet meme shared by cybernats in an attempt to sway the Skexit debate. Yes, it was invented in 2014. I think she was already dead by then, wasn't she? I'm not sure. Do you know what? I can't remember when Thatcher died. Must have been around then. Let's just go Margaret. Oh, come on. Margaret Thatcher. When do we reckon? When did she die? Oh, she would have been dead. 8th of April 2013. She died in the Ritz. What a marvellous place to die. I hope to do the same one day. Anyway, embarrassingly for Mr. Brown, who's found himself embroiled in another fake news claim this week. Oh yeah, God, we've done the story on that yesterday, which is just, the man's full of his own bollocks, isn't he? He was saying about how people in England pay more in tax than people in Scotland. And we rebutted that yesterday because it's quite clearly untrue. The man has lost hold of his mental faculties, hasn't he? Anyway, he used the same speech to talk about an SNP rebuttal unit, which the party claims will attack misinformation from unionists. However, it seems that this does not extend to their own politicians, with Mr. Brown's words still on their SNP website when the Scottish Express checked on December the 15th, and that was just a day short of 2 months since its delivery. We questioned the SNP about the veracity of the quote with the SNP at the time, pointing out the only reference to it was from a meme. However, there came no response because they don't want to admit that they made themselves look like a complete arse. Talking of complete arses, there's a picture of Keith Brown. Scottish Conservative Deputy Constitution spokesperson Alexander Stewart, again long titles, told the Scottish Express Keith Brown and the SNP are clearly all too happy to double down on these false claims. This is typical of the nationalist attitude towards accurate information, especially if they think it will help them push their independence obsession. And I must point out, especially if they think they can get away with it. But the trouble is, that's happening less often now, because we're all aware that they lie about everything. And so virtually every word, and I'm not kidding, like every single thing they say, is immediately fact-checked. They're not allowed to get away with anything. It's not as though someone who speaks 1,000 words of truth makes one little mistake and it's generally got, nobody checks it because they just know the man speaks true. And he might get away with a little mistake if it's genuine. I mean, someone who constantly speaks true, he probably is just a mistake. But for someone like anyone, I could say someone like Keith Brown, all of them in the SNP, you believe nothing. You believe nothing. They told you they got £4.20 in their pocket. You'd assume that they haven't got £4.20 in their pocket. They're just liars. Anyway, their rebuttal unit that has yet to materialise should start close to home and slap down their deputy leader for brazenly continuing to claim Margaret Thatcher made these remarks when she never, ever did. Mr. Brown had told delegates at the conference in Aberdeen, thinking about the current Tory party, she might these days be viewed as a wet liberal, but Margaret Thatcher had a different view on this, he said. I say that because if you think about this, Margaret Thatcher would never have had in her cabinet Enoch Powell, and yet Rishi Sunak has got Suella Braverman in one of the highest offices of the state. Well, Thatcher would never have had Enoch Powell in there because Enoch Powell had retired from politics by the time she came to power. Enoch Powell was the 50s, for heaven's sake. What is wrong with these people? Also, interesting, another tangent. It's another tangent. Enoch Powell, right? Young at the time, I think he's been beaten since, but at the time, he was the youngest professor at Oxbridge. The war started. He joined as a private, and by the end of the war was a brigadier general, because I think brigadiers were still general staff at that point. I think it was only after the war that they lost brigadier, but he got all the way up to brigadier, which in the American Air Force or American Army would be a general rank. Not bad from a private, is it? He was military intelligence. He was a poet. He had loads of books published. Then went into politics and became a Minister of State. So regardless of his politics, one thing you can say about Enoch Powell is he kicked around a bit. He knew what he was talking about. Travelled the world, done a lot. Not like the lot that come in today, straight out of uni with a PPE and never done a day's working around. Anyway, earlier this month, that's the end of that tangent. I can't help myself sometimes. Anyway, earlier this month, the SNP was hugely critical of Sir Keir Starmer for saying Miss Thatcher had been a transformative figure, which she certainly was, and sought to drag Britain out of its stupor by setting loose our natural entrepreneurialism. And again, yes, she did. The SNP famously helped pave the way to number 10 for Mrs Thatcher. They did. They were the ones that brought down the Labour government and put her in power. And then they slagged her off. It's almost as though they don't know what they're doing. And they still don't. Anyway, round this off, we asked again the SNP if they had plans to remove the fake comment. But a spokesman merely responded to the Tory comment saying, yet again, the Tories tried to rewrite history and we're showing themselves to be against the Scottish people's right to national self-determinism. So it looks like that fake quote, that lie, that misnomer will remain on their website. And we can only draw one conclusion. The SNP absolutely adore Margaret. I'm coming up. Sorry about all the tangents. I say it just as I'm sitting there and doing things, and then little things pop in your head, and it just if I don't say them out there, I won't remember them. You see, because they're like transient little flashes, and if I don't say them, they've gone. Like fireflies in my brain. Anyway, yeah. So there they are. They're still pushing the same narrative of bullshit and lies. They can't help themselves. They won't take down this quote that doesn't exist because it suits their purpose. And poor old Margaret would be whirling in her urn if she thought she would help to break up the UK. She was very pro-union, of course. Leader of the Conservative and Union Party. Anyway, we'll still stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button. Do hit the like button. And definitely watch the next video. There's so many. There's so many today. It's such a busy day. Anyway, till then, take care and goodbye.